Hello everyone and welcome back to Guns of Infinity. I do apologize for the bit of a delay that we've had as far as recording videos and uploading stuff like that. Of course, storms rolled through the area last week, so internet was out for a little bit, so that caused some issues, and I was also trying to get some other things handled. But we are back, and we will go ahead and continue with Guns of Infinity. So in the last episode, we saw the other side of the fall of Kharangia. We actually led the charge. Well, not the actual forlorn hope, but we led the charge due to some cowardice on our other superior officers' behalf. But of course, he's suffering from different things and stuff like that. So that kind of caused him to get scared at the last moment. So we had to take charge, and it turned out to be a pretty big success. So, guys, Roast is still alive. I'm still alive to live another day and fight another battle. And now we will go ahead and see what has happened afterwards, because there's also the things that transpired after the siege, after we got into the city. There was the looting, the rioting, and stuff like that. So, and of course, we didn't do anything in order to stop it, but I also felt like there was nothing that could be done in that situation. It was just really, really bad. So then I'm only one soldier leading a few troops, so there was only so much that was going to get done. But now we're going to see the fallout of that. So let's look at the stats here, shall we? Don't think anything may have changed, but let's see the state of war. Okay. Now let's see. I think this might be the only thing here. Yeah, I think this might be the only thing here, but I'll go ahead and look through. Let's see, late summer of 609, a comprehensive report on the Battle of Blagia is published for general circulation. The competence and ability of the late Duke of Wolfram becomes a matter of fierce public debate in Tierra. With the crown now nearly 40 million crown in debt and no end in sight, criticism quickly spreads from the Duke of Wolfram's conduct to that of the entire army. Assisted by a battery of experimental siege guns, Kharangia's walls are breached. The city is taken by storm. So yes, that's pretty much the only thing that's really happened there. The Duke of Havenport's army begins to lay siege to Kharangia. Initial progress is slow, with Havenport's artillery proving inadequate for the task of breaching Kharangia's walls. The King's division takes the town of Solokaville on the northern edge of the Great Forest, facing Korobird's army. So, yeah, I think we've already read this stuff here. Anywho, we shall return back to the game. In chapter 6, in which the cavalry officer winters in the city of Kharangia. It is still raining 6 days later as you stand on the roof of the great bastion of Kharangia's citadel. What had been a drizzle on the night the city fell quickly grew in weight over the next few days. Now it is an unceasing downpour, a constant torrent soaking through your thick greatcoat and plastering the red and white plumes of your helmet flat against the polished black leather. You hardly stand alone in your misery. The other officers of the Duke of Havenport's army stand with you, arrayed by regiment atop the massive triangular fortification. The rain falls upon them as well, and they too must bear the burden of soaked overcoats and hats made cold and twice their dry weight by the rain. All around you, the roll of drums rises, a sodden rattle. From the assembled mass of Tieran officers, the Duke of Havenport steps forward, carrying himself as if he were before the imperial court of the Kianzi and not soaked to the skin, standing on the cannon-scarred fortification of a burnt-out foreign city. Your army commander has every reason to be proud, for another man is carried slowly forward to meet the Kantari general, Havenport's opposite in every aspect, paunchy, white-bearded, and stooped. His eyes droop and his head lolls listlessly in the fugue of the irreparable senile. Where Havenport strides forth with chin held high, his counterpart is hauled forward on a covered, sagging palanquin, head resting precariously on a set of silken cushions. He is Prince Boleslaw of Kharangia, a lord of the Antari League Congress, and he has come to formally surrender his city. Havenport stops before the defeated Antari lord. He bows. The two men, one still young and vigorous, the other elderly and ailing, exchange a handful of words, all drowned out by the quiet hiss of the autumn rain. Prince Boleslaw makes a motion to his side. An attendant rushes forward with a box of dark wood chased in silver, its flanks glowing with the faint light of the bane. Within sits the Great Seal, a confection of silver and ruby. To hold it is to hold the city. To relinquish it, the most definitive act of surrender. More words, then, with a wave of his hand, Prince Boleslaw orders his servants to hand the box to the Duke of Havenport. The Duke takes the box with both hands. The runes upon the dark wood flicker out as Havenport opens the lid and glances inside. After a moment, he nods, his expression no more awed than that of a farmer taking possession of a cow. He closes the box, and the runes flare back to life. The Antari servant steps back and kneels in customary obeisance, officially acknowledging the Kantari general as master of Kharangia. It is done. The three customary cheers sound as the Duke returns to his assembled officers, but the voices come out weary and sodden. The oppressive gray downpour dulls even the luster of victory. The man next to you likely bears yet more worry, though his scarred face does not show it. Caius de Alcazarosta was supposed to be promoted to major for his part in leading the Forlorn Hope, yet there has been no word of the promised promotion. While the Army's administrative workings have never been particularly efficient, you cannot help but wonder if such delay has less to do with bureaucracy and more with Casarosta's death-born status. You suppose that only time will see a resolution to this matter. Poor Casarosta. Only one part of the surrender ceremony remains. As the sound of the taut, joyless cheers subside, three more men emerge from the Tierran ranks. One carries with him an immense triangle of folded cloth, resplendent in orange and blue. To the sound of a single drum's beat, they walk to the center of the bastion, where a wooden flagpole rises. The drums rattle again. With practiced movements, two of the three officers step forward to pull down the powder-stained, tattered, and sodden rag which had served as a symbol of defiance for the city. In its place rises a splendid new flag, the griffins and towers of Tierra, worked in bright silk. The sight fills you with a sense of... Let's see. Emptiness. One city will not win us this war. Guarded optimism. We've won a battle, not the war. Pride. This is a great victory. An ultimate victory is within reach. I mean, I don't want to be that optimistic. I'll have a guarded optimism about this. We've won a battle, but not the war. True, it is a momentous occasion. The fall of Kharangia is a great victory and goes far towards improving the overall strategic situation. Tierra's fortunes are on the rise once again. However, that does not mean victory is within reach yet. Corobeard's army still remains in the field, and it will take more than the loss of a single city to bring the League Congress to the table. You take care not to allow your thoughts to veer towards the over-optimistic as you depart the ceremony. Kharangia is a great victory, but there will more likely than not be a great deal more fighting to come, and probably going to be just as terrible as some of the other ones as well. The main streets of Kharangia have been cleared of rubble and bodies for 2 days now, but not even the rain has yet washed away the sharp, sulphurous stink of gunpowder and the cloying smell of death. You have become used to the smell now, just as you have become used to the sight of burned out buildings and the glimpses of piteous clusters of refugees, driven out of their homes by fire or Tierran soldiers and forced to huddle together for warmth. They stay to the darkened alleys and side street for the most part, hiding from the path of the swaggering invaders. They have good reason to fear, you suppose. The orgy of pillage, arson, murder, and rape had lasted 3 days after the city's fall. So great was the carnage wreaked upon Kharangia's citizenry that there was not enough drywood to burn all the dead. Hundreds of bodies have been tipped into the harbor to be washed out into the Collegian Sea with the tide. Good God. The task of actually putting an end to the sack had been an even more difficult proposition. Almost the whole of the army had gone berserk and could not be brought back under discipline. For those 3 days, the Duke of Havenport's army had effectively ceased to exist, save for portions of its high command, your dragoons, and a handful of isolated units. In the end, the Duke had resorted to drastic measures. He had some of the few troops still in good order construct a set of gallows in the main square, then made it known that he would arrest and hang one looter every hour until the men were back under the discipline of their officers. Still, it had taken 9 hours for the looting to end. Jesus. You pass under the shadow of the gallows as you cross the main square. A corpse still hangs from the rain-soaked rope. a half-rotting carcass dressed in rags which had once been a line infantryman jacket. The rain has driven away the flies, and the carrion birds flew south weeks ago, but the maggots remain, pale-bodied colonies bubbling and churning in the cavities of the corpse's discolored mouth and the empty sockets where its eyes used to be. It is both a reminder and a warning of what is to happen the next time Tierran officers lose control of their men. You cannot help but find the whole business to be actually pretty lenient. I mean, you would think they would execute far more people, but at the same time, I guess they don't want to anger too many of their troops at the same time. So, did the Duke of Havenport really think that such a token gesture would do anything to maintain discipline within his ranks? To you, the hanging of a handful of men for the aggregated sins of an army is a sign of softness at best. No, it would have been better to hang them all, every looter, every rapist, and every murderer caught wearing Tierran uniform. That was what the king's articles of war demanded, after all. That would have been a firm show of resolve, no more and certainly no less. To punish less than a dozen men for the crimes of thousands smacks of arbitrariness and unfairness to you. Not only would such a petty gesture soon be forgotten in an army which does not hesitate to flog its infantry, but it leaves the vast majority of the guilty to walk free. No, you do not think it will do. Not at all. Kharangia is a city fit to make Noringia look like a mere fishing village. Before the siege, it had boasted a population of more than 30,000, 6 times the pre-war population of the provincial port town which had served as the main base of operations for the king's army until now. The city had been even greater once. 2 generations ago, it had been twice as populous, the major conduit of commerce between southern Antar and its overseas trading partners. Its massive docks had been built to service the trade, and long ago, the city's suburbs' natural harbor had been filled with ships from throughout the northern kingdoms. King Ulrich's war had changed that. Tierrans like you, the last war betwixt the unified kingdom and the League of Antar had been triumphant proof that Tierra could stand on its own as a naval power. To most of the League Congress, it had been a humiliating but minor defeat. To the rest of the known world, it had been an inconsequential thing. A 6-year sequence of naval skirmishes between fleets of a disunited and declining Antar and a third-rate power who happened to possess a passable navy and a few bold captains. For Kharangia, it had been disastrous. For 6 years, the lean frigates of the Royal Tierran Navy and privateers in the pay of bold young King Auric's Spitfire had stalked the Collegian Sea, dismantling the Antari merchant fleet. By the end of the war, the maritime trade that had been Kharangia's lifeblood had dried up entirely, and the city fell into a long decline. Still, even in its current state, decrepit, battered, and broken by siege, Kharangia is a massive city, full of grand houses and opulent mansions. As a relatively senior officer in the Duke of Havenport's army, you've been given one for use as your billet, a granite-faced 2-story manse in the stately Highgarden district, complete with a cobbled courtyard and a small coach house for Thunderer. You may be about to winter in a hostile city full of resentful inhabitants as an officer of an invading army, but at least you shall be comfortable. Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. It also kind of makes me wonder just how more advanced are some of these other nations, because if they looked at this as something that was kind of inconsequential and not that big a deal, like how much more powerful are some of these other nations? Like I know Takaran is, I think, the most powerful, and they seem to be, I guess as far as the military technology goes and everything, of course, with the Bane sense and stuff like that, far more advanced than us, but it makes it sound like every place is pretty much more advanced than us, so it's been interesting. Marion is waiting for you as you step through the heavy double doors and into the plush carpeted antechamber. He strips off your soaked overcoat and helmet with brisk efficiency as you allow the warmth of the well-lit room to seep through your wet clothes. They are next to go, stripped off in the privacy of your bedroom. Perhaps you will have a glass or two of the strong Antari potato wine, which somehow escaped diluting intact to help further warm yourself. Alas, no sooner do you finish changing into a dry shirt and trousers does Marion knock on the door. Lord Reynard is asking for you downstairs, sir, he announces through the door. He seems quite distraught. Your drink, it seems, shall have to wait. Lord Lieutenant Renard de All Findlay appears to you more than merely distraught as you descend the stairs. I ain't mean no trouble ye, sir, but he takes a deep, shuddering breath. I fear I found myself in most dire need of your counsel. You nod warily. In the past 2 years, you've never seen Lord Renard in such a state of worry. Would you like a drink, Lieutenant? You ask for courtesy's sake. The young aristocrat shakes his head. No, sir. He takes another breath. This best be done with a clear head. Lord Renard is no drunkard, but you've never known him to turn down a glass of wine. Whatever is in your subordinate's mind must be a weighty matter indeed. Very well, Lieutenant. What is it you need? Well, he pauses and tries again. It's just that no matter how he begins, he cannot seem to avoid choking on his words until finally he blurts it all out. Sir, we're on the right side, ain't we? Your reaction and your outrage come immediately and automatically. I beg your pardon, sir. You ask flat and cold. I was 7 years old when this war started, the other officer recounts. From that time on, I ain't heard nothing save talk of how we're in the right, of the heroism of the king's army. Ain't any wonder that I'd got myself a commission in my father's regiment as soon as I could, to come to Antar, kill me some villainous foe, fetch me my own glory. The adolescent lordling sighs. 2 years of this war, I ain't seen glory, I ain't killed any villains, only men whose crime was to rise against an invading army. Still, I kept my thoughts to myself until understanding grasped you, until we stormed Kharangia. Lord Renard nods. He doesn't have to explain further. You had been there with him. It ain't the Antari to blame either. Those was men in Terran colors, our fellows. We let it happen, encouraged it even. Ain't that make us the villains? Well, I mean, we are kind of the villains in their eyes at least, but yeah, I mean, things did go too far. That disgusts me as much as it does you. It was a cruel necessity. Do you mean to cling to such childish rubbish about heroes and villains forever? Let's not be cruel to him, and it does disgust me as much as it does him. Lord Renard nods, which is why you didn't let any of our men join it. You nod back. We may share a common cause with evil men, but so long as we remain righteous in our own conduct, we cannot be counted among them. The young aristocrat nods, his anxiety replaced by resolution. Then I must resolve to do good and count myself fortunate that I might be blessed with such a fine model of virtue for a commanding officer. Thank the saints and thank you, sir. The young aristocrat begins to turn for the door, then hesitates. If it ain't trouble you too much, might I come to you for advice on such things in the future? Of course. I don't have a problem with that, Lord Renard. Lord Renard offers you a firm grin. Thank you, sir. Good day. The young officer gives you a light nod before turning towards the door and heading out into the rain. So hopefully we can turn around and keep him being a good man and try and keep our men being a good man at the very least. But, oh god, it's gonna be hard. You're not even given much more time to settle in, barely enough to get used to the place and dash off a few letters home. Soon you find your desk besieged by forms, requests, and complaints, with more coming practically by the hour. With Lieutenant Colonel Keene gone, the organizational work of keeping 3 squadrons of cavalry in fighting trim falls to the remaining senior officers of the regiment in Kharangia. Normally, it would not be so difficult to split the work 3 ways, but Lieutenant Butler quickly proves himself as hapless in front of a desk as he is in the head of a body of fighting men. Worse yet, orders soon come down from the Duke of Havenport's staff detailing Kazarosa's 3rd Squadron to patrol Kharangia's hinterlands for yet more partisan activity. As a result, you soon find yourself all but trapped at your desk, beset by half a dozen problems at a time. As the day grows shorter and colder, you're required to spend hours dealing with the billeting, provisioning, payment and discipline of well over 400 dragoons. You have little time to rest, for as soon as you reduce your pile of pressing issues to a manageable size, Marion sits down yet another small mountain of damnable vexations before you. There's no time even to supervise the drill of your men. Thus it is your subordinates who must take up the entire job of maintaining your men while you deal with the summarily unending problems of a regiment settling into a freshly occupied and still very hostile city. Sometimes you cannot help but envy them. It is not until day and late autumn that you have time to consider a matter which had been on your mind repeatedly over the weeks. In the king's army, it is not uncommon for the colonel of a regiment to cite soldiers under his command for extraordinary achievement. However, when it is a mere captain doing the citing, such actions might be considered presumptuous, or worse, self-promotion. Still, you cannot seem to shake off the nagging sentiment your men should have at least something to show for standing by you during the fall of Kharangia. While they had simply done what was expected of them and maintained their discipline, they had done so when few other units of the Duke of Havenport's army had. Perhaps you should cite some of your men in your next report to Grenadier Square, recommending them for commendations. Of course, even broaching the subject in an official dispatch would be overstepping the bounds of your formal authority, something which neither Grenadier Square nor the army as a whole would much approve. Ah, politics, my old friend. You know what? I mean, I think since we're the only ones that pretty much didn't do anything heinous, I think I'm gonna request the entire squadron to be honored. Quite honestly, because I mean, we deserve it. Considering the fact that people were hanged for this, those very few people, we deserve to be honored for what happened there, and we should be seen as an example of what to do as opposed to what everybody else was doing. All right, let's try it. You quickly sketch out a request for a commendation, not for a handful of your men, but for your entire squadron. After all, to reward only a few of your nearly 200 dragoons under your command for the resolute discipline of all would seem almost an act of supreme unfairness. Thus, you do not hesitate to request some sort of honor which might apply collectively to the entirety of 6 Squadron Royal Dragoons. Not that the buffoons at Grenadier Square would see it that way, of course, nor the rest of the army for that matter. For a man who had not been there, who had not seen your men stand firm while others went feral with bloodlust, your recommendation will stink of self-aggrandizement. Still, that is something you are willing to put up with, if it means every man in your squadron is given the recognition for their dedication that they deserve. No sooner do you write out the last sentence does Marion step in with a fresh crop of problems to solve. You hand the request off to Marion so that he might include it with your report. Then you turn your attention to other, more pressing matters. As the weeks grind on, you find your volume of incoming paperwork entering a steady and definitive decline. As the Royal Dragoons settle into their new billets and the regiment's junior officers become increasingly confident in their ability to deal with minor issues themselves, the number of problems which you must personally see to diminishes with every day. Unfortunately, you have damned little opportunity to spend your free time outside your quarters. The unending rains of autumn have turned into the wet, miserable snow which heralds the slow process of transition into winter. While the rain had merely washed off the cobbles of Kharangia's roads, the sleet turns them into slippery stretches of ice, slush, and mud. Only with the greatest care can either man or horse use such roads for their intended purpose, and the drilling of troops in the city's squares is made a futile exercise. Only the activity around the city's docks continues in the face of the worsening weather, and then only out of necessity. The last of the year's convoys from Tierra dock and unload their precious cargoes of weapons, equipment, and food with the utmost urgency, lest they be trapped in Antara when the storms of deep winter make the Calesian Sea entirely unnavigable. When the last ships leave, Edmund Gehring is on board them. He's on his way back to Atoria to work on the project which you invested your hard-earned funds into. Then the docks, too, are silent, save for the crash of the rising sea and the howl of the winter wind. One morning you wake to find the outside world frozen, the roads carpeted with freshly fallen snow. The entire winter has come to Kharangia. As your days become more dull and empty of anything resembling productive labor, the weather grows increasingly worse. The snow comes down in a greater volume than you have ever seen, and the howling of the winter wind becomes a constant, even through the thick walls of your requisitioned house. Time passes in a strange overcast fugue. The clouds become thick enough to blot out the sun, Even at midday, you must keep a lamp lit to see beyond your own outstretched hand with anything resembling clarity. In one of your now semi-regular games of Tassenward with Lord Marcus Havenport, the young Kentari nobleman, who spent some of the childhood touring Antar with his father, tells you that Kharangia's winters are mild compared to the northern region of the continent. You find that thought more than a little discomforting. Then, one day, the monotony of your long, cold winter afternoon is broken when an unexpected visitor barges into your office, his white-rimmed greatcoat still wrapped around him, snow melt leaving a trail of wet across your carpets as he makes his way to your desk. "I need a second," announces Lieutenant Blaylock, drawing himself up before you. For a moment, you stare in confusion, nearly certain that you have misunderstood. "I beg your pardon, Lieutenant. I need a second," Blaylock repeats, more excited than annoyed. "For a duel. Oh, wonderful." "You realize," you reply, giving voice to your first and most relevant thought, "that dueling is punishable in the King's Article of War, do you not?" "It is, in fact, punishable by death, not that such a fact seems to have dissuaded your impetuous subordinate any." "He insulted the honor of the regiment," Blaylock answers, indignant. "What was I to do?" "I challenge," he answered. "Now we are to resolve the issue with pistols." You nod knowingly. A man might insult another man and come to blows, but never would such an affray lead to a formal challenge. For an officer to openly insult another regiment, though, is a far graver offense. In doing so, not only has Blaylock's would-be opponent cast aspersion on the man himself, but on you and every other fellow who has ever served in the Royal Dragoons. To back down after such an insult would have been unthinkable. "I doubt there's much danger of me losing, of course," Blaylock continues. "Only thing is, I don't have a second. Lord Renard refused outright, and saints be damned if I'll ask Sandral when the man barely knows which end of a pistol the ball comes out of. It is hardly a trifling thing for a man to face an impending duel without a second. It is the second who must inspect the pistols to ensure that neither have been tampered with, stand in for the duelist in case he should refuse to show, and witness the proceeding. A duel without seconds is basically murder." "So," Blaylock concludes, "I have only you left, sir. Might I rely upon you to help me uphold the regiment's honor? The problem remains, of course, the fact that should you accept, you would effectively be an accomplice to a breach of military law. The punishment would be quite severe. It is, of course, only if you get caught." Ooh. Well, maybe we won't get caught. Let's see. Read it active Blaylock seconds. Refuse to act as Blaylock seconds. Refuse to forbid Blaylock from following through with this foolishness. I probably couldn't do that. I might even have to fight him, and I'm pretty sure I can't do that. Inquire further as to circumstances to Blaylock duel. With a little prodding, Blaylock gives you the full story. Apparently, according to your subordinate, he had been drinking at the officers' club when another lieutenant, an officer of the 8th of Foot, who had arrived from Tierra some months ago, made some rather foul aspersions regarding the dragoons' conduct at the Battle of Blagia. Blaylock, hot-headed that he was, immediately confronted the other man, demanding that he retract what your subordinate refers to as obvious falsehoods. Of course, neither man had actually been present at Blagia, and it is likely both Blaylock's vision of your regiment's heroism and his counterpart's image of its cowardice lie somewhat distant from the truth. Things had escalated from there. Okay, well, I can't leave him hanging in this, so I will agree, and I pray to God I don't get caught. Blaylock grins wide when you give your reply. "Thank you, sir. The business is to take place at dawn tomorrow, outside the north gate, out of sight of the sentries on the walls. I trust you have no objections, sir." You're about to assure your subordinate that you have no objections at all when your mind catches on one possible complication. "Just one, Blaylock," you reply. "Who else knows about the time and place for this duel?" Your words give the lieutenant a moment of pause. "Only Lord Renard that I know of. A few of the men at the club might have overheard as well." You frown. Those few officers are few too many. Knowing the way rumors spread in this army, the provost will catch wind of this soon enough. We shall have to change the location of the duel unless you fancy getting us arrested. Blaylock's brow furrows in thought for a moment, then he nods in agreement. Best we move the location to somewhere by the western gate. I'll make the arrangements. He pauses for half an instant. Thank you, sir. I'd not have thought of that, he adds hesitantly. You smile despite yourself, admitting that he made an oversight seems to have cost your subordinate considerable effort. Get some rest then, Lieutenant, you reply. Make sure you are fresh for tomorrow. Blaylock snaps a crisper salute than you've ever seen from him before showing himself out. I wonder if that happened because of my intelligence. Because, I mean, my intellect is pretty high, so maybe that was the reason why that happened. Maybe that wouldn't have happened if my intellect wasn't that high. Not sure. The next day's dawn finds you and three other men an hour's ride outside of Kharangia's western gate, knee-deep in the snow of a clearing bounded with the skeletal forms of bare-branched trees. Before you stand the duelists, Blaylock, looking quite composed for a man about to face the killing end of a pistol, and his opponent, a slim young man with the barest wisp of a mustache, the officer who might now be forced to pay for his insults to your regiment with his life. Your counterpart, a lieutenant of the 8th of Foot, presents to you a box of dark butane wood. Sure. Inside sits a pair of finely made pistols nestled in cushions of red velvet. For a minute, the two of you take out and examine both pistols. It is your responsibility as seconds to ensure that neither weapon has been sabotaged. This done, you present the instruments to the two duelists. Blaylock looks to the two of you, then to his opponent. We exchange fire at 5 paces. Lieutenant Aguilar fires first, he announces with a coolness bordering on nonchalance. Agreed? Blaylock's opponent, Lieutenant Aguilar, accepts readily, as does his second. To you, 5 paces in front of a pistol seems far too close a range for any sensible man to stand at, especially knowing that his opponent is to fire first. You can only assume that Blaylock having, you hope, more experience than you in this business, knows what he's doing. With the terms agreed upon, the two primary actors take their places. Both you and your counterpart load your pistols. Should either duelist show signs of cheating now, his opponent's second has the right to shoot him dead on the spot. Then all is in readiness. Aguilar raises his pistol, his hands trembling as Blaylock stands confidently before him, feet planted square, taking not even the slightest effort to make himself a smaller target. Go on then, I'm right here, Blaylock taunts. Aguilar's pistol begins to shake. You cannot understand how, but the infantryman's anxiety actually seems to worsen. Blaylock grins and grows wider. Shall I be waiting here all day? I thought you infantry were supposed to be able to manage 3 shots a minute in any weather, and here you have not yet fired one. You're close enough to Aguilar to see his eyes widen in panic. Blaylock's eyes narrow in satisfaction, as if he were the man behind the gun rather than in front of it. Fire, saints be damned, fire! Aguilar fires. Oh, okay. I got achievement for that. Why, thank you. The dull crack of the pistol shot echoes through the clearing. For a moment, all is silent. The intended target looks down, then looks back up, expression confident. He is untouched. Blaylock's grin turns feral as he raises his own pistol, his hand smooth and steady. Now, my turn. Your subordinate brings the muzzle of his weapon up so that it points squarely at his opponent's head. For a marksman of Blaylock's skill, it would be almost impossible for him to miss at such a close range. For a second, it seems as if your lieutenant is about to blow out his opponent's brains with the most contemptuous ease. Around him, the 3 of you tense, waiting for the fatal shot. I want an apology, Blaylock says, peering at a terrified Aguilar down the barrel of his pistol. I apologize, sir, the other man replies, his voice quivering. I spoke in haste, and whilst under the effect of a great deal of wine, Blaylock lowers the barrel of his pistol until it no longer points to Aguilar's head, but to his loins. Beg, he commands. Beg hard enough, and maybe I'll leave you with both your life and enough gristle to make living worthwhile. Aguilar sinks to his knees, his spent pistol dropping to the snow. His eyes are stuck wide with fear, and tears are running down his cheeks. His voice rises frantically, clouds of breath puffing from his mouth like a boiling kettle until it's nothing more than a sad, uncontrolled blubbering. The snow beneath him begins to stain yellow. Good lord. Student pissed himself. Blaylock barks out Blaylock barks out a rough, derisive, hoarse whiny of a laugh. Saints be damned, you aren't even worth the bloody powder. With a look that is both one of disgust and triumph, he offhandedly empties his pistol at the far trees, then tosses it into the snow before his humiliated opponent. Honor is satisfied, he announces before turning to you. Best we get out of here. I wasn't planning on killing him, of course, Blaylock assures you as the two of you ride back to the gate. I do not think I should ever want to kill another Tierran on purpose. So why bother with the whole business in the first place, you ask out of sheer curiosity. Now that you've thought about it, your involvement in this illegal duel may actually help you, giving you a reputation as a man who will back his subordinates and his regiment to the hilt. It is a thought that improves your mood substantially. I only meant to humiliate him, your subordinate replies as the two of you pass under the stone mass of the western gate. The sentries gives you strange looks, but do not stop you. After all, you are two cavalry officers simply out for a morning ride. If I killed him, some might think that there was some truth in the bugger's words, and that I had silenced him to keep him quiet. Blaylock continues. By marking him a coward before witnesses, I have made worthless every single word that has issued from his mouth. This way the rumor stops, and we get a reputation as men unfit to be trifled with. I suppose the lads will quite like that. You nod. If there's anything that a Tierran soldier despises most, it is a coward. Likewise, if there's anything that a Tierran soldier admires the most, it is superiors who stand up for them. In any case, Blaylock concludes pridefully, it is a very conclusive way to win a dispute. Let's see, then I must congratulate you on your victory. You should refrain from such foolishness in the future. It was also a very cruel way to win a dispute. Let us never speak of this again. No, let's congratulate him. Blaylock chuckles and shakes his head. It's your victory too, sir. I couldn't have done it without a second. He hesitates for a moment, then smiles again. Besides, if you hadn't suggested changing the site, the province would have likely put an end to the matter before it could have been settled. You nod. Perhaps that is so. Your subordinate hesitates again as if he were trying to speak a different language. I best thank you for that, sir. Wouldn't want my commanding officer to think me ungrateful. You might thank me by next time seeking out my counsel before things go too far. Blaylock chuckles in reply. Perhaps I shall, sir. Perhaps I shall. He raises the tips of his fingers to the brim of his helmet. With your permission? You nod, dismissing the other officer, leaving him free to turn his horse towards the house where your officers are quartered. Thus, you are left to ride back to your own billet alone. Well, at least that turned out well and no one got killed, so, all is well, I guess, in the end. Let's see what we have here. As the wind and snow of winter finally begin to give way to warmer weather, the amount of work bound for your desk increases once more. Though the harbor is still iced over and the streets still covered with snow, arrangements are already being made for the coming campaigning season. Thus, little by little, the preliminary work of getting the regiment ready for action begins to make its weight known upon your shoulders. There's much to be done. Horses must be shot, faulty and worn equipment must be replaced, and those few who have perished over the winter to disease, cold, and skirmishes with the enemy must be struck off the record so that the Grenadier Square does not waste the Crown's precious coins on rations and pay for dead men. Arrangements must also be made for replacements. There will be a fresh draft of men arriving with the first convoy of the year, men to replace those who have fallen, deserted, or been invalid over the past year. Your squadron has taken some heavy losses over the past year. Some reinforcements will be quite welcome. The problem, of course, lies with the sour but undeniable fact that with each passing year of the war, the quality of the newly arrived men grows worse and worse. The flower of Tyrian manhood had flocked to the colors at the beginning of the war, but now, 8 years later, you are more likely to get gutter scum and criminals, given the choice between the king's dam and Gaol. Is that right? Sure. Adding such men to your squadron's ranks will be detrimental to the qualities of your unit, to say the least. However, you could try to use whatever influence you might have with your superiors and the Duke of Havenport's staff to ensure that the replacements your squadron gets will be the best available. They will, of course, still be the best of a very bad lot, and there will likely not be very many of them, but it could prove better than the alternative. What shall you do? Request as many replacements as I can. I throw my weight around and try to get the best replacements. It's not worth the trouble. I don't request replacements. Well, it's already said I got heavy losses, so I'm gonna need replacements. I don't think I want to throw my weight around for this to try and get the best replacements. I'm just gonna get as many of them as I can because at the end of the day, they're all shit. So that's probably gonna be the best route to take when it comes to this. You've requested more than 50 replacements. Okay, nice. That's right. It is of paramount importance to ensure that your command is as close to full strength as possible. While you must admit that the influx of less than ideal replacements will cause a great deal of trouble at first, it is nothing that a few weeks of intensive drill and a few skirmishes with the enemy cannot make right. The problems should not take much longer than a few months to resolve themselves, and at the end of that time, you would much rather have a squadron at or near full strength than one enfeebled by the gaps in the ranks. You quickly pen a memorandum addressed to your superiors, apprising them of the situation in your squadron and requesting of them enough men to bring your command back to its established strength of 200 officers and men. This done, you move on to the next issue. Over the next few weeks, the level of administrative work only continues to increase. It seems that the Duke of Havenport and his staff expect Prince Corbeard himself to send his army to retake Kharangia when the snow melts, and Havenport, it appears, seems intent on making him fight for every pace the Antari advance. As a result, not only must you prepare solely for the opening of the year's campaigning in the spring, but you must also make preparations for the regiment's needs all throughout the summer and autumn months as well, and all of this before the snow has even melted. At times, you begin to feel a strange and questionable sympathy towards the officers who man the desk at Grenadier Square, consigned as they are to such tedium for the whole of the year. It is during one of these moments that you are jolted out of your unwelcome reverie by a commotion outside, loud enough to be audible through the windows. You peer down onto the street to see a fast-flowing stream of humanity coursing below you. A strange mix of officers, enlisted men, and even Antari civilians, all of them moving towards the docks in a state of great excitement. The door half opens. Marion's head peeks through. "Sir," he says in half-apologetic tone of a servant intruding on his master, "perhaps you might come to the balcony? There is something you might want to see." Oh God, what now? Hastily throwing on your greatcoat, you follow Corporal Marion out through the doors of your bedroom onto the covered balcony. The house you had requisitioned, like most of the townhouses in Kharangia's High Garden Quarter, possesses a commanding view of the city and its environs. While the window in your office looks out over the inland approaches, the balcony on the other side faces the docks, the harbor, and the dark blue expanse of the Khalangian Sea. "There," Marion exclaims, pointing to a low shape slicing through the water. "There she is. It is a ship, that much is obvious, but it is of a sort which you have only seen once before in your life. It is no bigger and no more heavily built than an idle nobleman's pleasure yacht, but its slab-sided flanks and the midnight black of her hull give her an air of menace. The sharply flared bow and raked mast give her the lines of a predator. She slips into Kharangia's harbor in the face of a winter which has yet to run its course. Against the wind, her blue-gray sails filled by nothing but bane casting. A schooner of the Imperial Tokaran Navy. The last time you beheld such a vessel had been in the heady days before Blagia. The Tokarans had sent a diplomatic observer, though the woman in question did not seem to have a speck of diplomacy within the whole of her body. She had offered nothing but the sneering condescension so regularly given by the strong to the weak, and then left days before the disastrous reckoning against Mikhail of Korobit's army. Now they have come to the war in Antar once again. Okay, so Takarin has showed up once again. That's always lovely. Let's see. If the Takarans have come to watch us fight once again, then they are welcome. The Takarian presence will certainly complicate matters. I only hope the new observer will be more polite than the last. The last thing we need are pointy-eared meddlers intruding in our war. Okay, let's not do that. Sure, if they want to, let them come by all means. The Altrix Vam Takara is not merely a foreign power. As far as matters of war are concerned, it is the foreign power to which all others are compared. The Takarans have the finest ships, the finest heavy cavalry, and the finest line infantry in creation, and the very tactics and doctrines which the soldiers of the king's army fight and die by were first thought of in Takaran academies. If the Takarans could see how a Tieran army fights, if they could get a first-hand impression of the discipline of the Tieran soldier and the mental alacrity of the Tieran officer, they would be hard-pressed not to revise upwards their estimation of Tieran arms. It soon appears as if the rest of the army shares your apprehension. Before long, rumors and whispers are flying like balls at a tennis court, and all meaningful work slows to a crawl as the informal network of informants that is the Duke's staff scrambles to make sense of the Zakarian visit. Some say he is an old military man, a former colonel in the Imperial Guard. Others say it is instead his wastrel of a son. No comes another rumor. It cannot be, for the visitor is not an observer, but a permanent ambassador, and not even the Takarans would be foolish enough to trust such business to a dissipated dilettante. The conjecture and hearsay becomes more outlandish with each day, but it does not last for long. 4 days after the black ship arrives, Marion hands you an invitation. The Duke of Havenport has made the decision to hold a dinner for the newly arrived Takaran envoy 2 days hence. Aside from the visitor himself, Havenport has invited many of his senior officers, yourself included. From the desk of the Duke, such an invitation carries the force of a command. It appears you shall be getting close enough to take a look at this mysterious Takaran envoy in person. On that evening, you do indeed manage to get quite close to him. Right next to him, in fact. Either through accident or design, you have been seated directly to the left of your point-eared Takaran. He looks very young and would be extremely handsome had his fine features lacked the characteristic elongated gauntness and death paleness of the Takaran race. For the first part of the dinner, through the aperitif and the soup, he remained silent, his wide, full lips pursed in thought, his almond-shaped blue eyes wandering about the room wistfully. It is only when the roast beef is served that you see his expression slip, for he clearly has little experience eating with both knife and fork. He jabs a slice of steaming red meat on his plate, this way and that with a genteel exuberance, but makes no progress in actually slicing off a piece small enough to eat. How does one do it? He says in accented but excellent Tieran, but the detachment fit only for confronting the truly silly, still stabbing at his beef all the while. It is like eating with bayonets. It is only then that you realize that he is speaking to you. Ah, I have forgotten my manners, he exclaims. I am Lord Cassius Van Holt, ambassador on behalf of Aldekizern Reskim Van Paulus I Takar, to the court of King Miguel of the unified kingdom of Tierra, at your service. He extends you a slight bow in his seat. Captain Sir Darren de Dracone, Royal Dragoons, at yours, you reply. The Takaran smiles brightly as he inclines his head to you again. A pleasure to meet you, sir. A pleasure indeed. Okay, so now we seem to have a chance to talk with the Takaran ambassador. Let's see what we have here. What is your opinion of your visit thus far? How does Takara see our war? You seem to me very young to be an ambassador. I probably shouldn't get personal. right off the bat. So yeah, we'll save the personal stuff for later. So you seem okay. Have you done any soldering yourself? You are of House Holt, as in Darien Vam Holt. Interesting. Let's ask him about the war. Yeah, let's just start off with the war. Hopefully he's not a jerk, but yeah. Lord Cassius offers a wry Lord Cassius offers a wry quirk of his lips, half amusement and half embarrassment. Actually, we do not think much of the war at all, he admits. To us, it is just another squabble between periphery powers, like the Civil War and whatever the hell that says. The ambassador expounds on the matter with a frankness verging on the tactless. Most Akarans concern themselves little with the conflicts and affairs of foreign nations. They are content to sit complacent in the knowledge that if something across the sea were to affect them, then the Aldacazern and his ministries would handle it. You think that this war against a mighty foe, the greatest and most desperate in your country's history, might be considered little more. To think that this war against a mighty foe, the greatest and most desperate in your country's history, might be considered a little more than a minor squabble is a strange notion. For Tierra, the war is a matter of life and death. To the Takarans, who sit safe behind their all-powerful navy and almighty intelligence apparatus, is nothing more than a sideshow. It is nothing more than a sideshow. The concept is both humbling and humiliating, and it quickly becomes clear to you that the only profitable course would be to change the subject entirely. Again, that kind of makes me wonder just like where things are going to go. Because again, if we ever have to fight to Karen, good God, they're probably going to obliterate us. So, surely there might be some type of way. Maybe there's some weakness we can exploit or something like that. But I would be curious to see if there will be some type of war or some type of conflict between them. Or maybe we can turn around and have some type of alliance or something. Maybe some newer nations will get introduced. I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting to see how things turn out in the end. So, let's see. What is your opinion of your visit thus far, sir? The ambassador grins. Aside from the absurd eating utensil, you mean? He replies, gesturing at the perfectly normal fork in his hand. Your Duke of Havenport has proven an excellent host thus far. Though it is strange finding myself in a culture which is so, he grasped for the term, inhibited? How so, you ask, curiosity piqued by the Takaran's observation. It has always been the impression among us that it is the Takaran culture which is bound most heavily by austere ritual. Lord Cassius chuckled softly. Surely you must know that it is only the most formal situations which require such ceremonious stoicism, he replies, his tone chiding. You must know that outside of such matters, we do not force ourselves into dancing around our opinions, as you Tierrans seem to do so often. We value honesty above such nonsense, which is why he stopped for a moment, perhaps realizing that he dances on the edge of bluntness and tactlessness, which is why this all seems very strange to me. The Takaran looks away, his eyes wandering for a moment before returning. It is also very unusual to see so many people in uniform, and not a single woman among them. It is not like Takara at all, he notes. The practice of barring women from your senate, well, your courts, and your army seems like a very, Lord Cassius pauses for a moment, a very quaint tradition. Honestly, it's not a quaint tradition. It's a pointless and self-defeating one. So, I think it's pretty stupid. But again, that's just kind of how times were back during that time. But you would think at some point you would want as many people to fight as possible. So, Is that so? Lord Cassius responds, his lips twisted in a faintly amused grin. You nod in reply. It seems to me most unreasonable that we must consider our bane-blooded ladies, who have proven themselves capable of commanding a household of 100 servants, enduring the ordeals of childbirth and child-rearing, and comporting themselves gracefully in court dresses, which often weighs no less than an infantryman's pack, of insufficient metal to go about the business of defending and governing the realm. The Takaran nods in agreement. Such an opinion cannot be a common one. If your society insists on resisting such a compelling argument, you shake your head. I must confess that it is not. The ambassador smiles. The ambassador's smile grows wider. You are an exceptional credit to your race, then, Captain, he says with an approving tone of sarcasm. We must hope that more of your people come to see things as you do. Okay, so I mean, he seemed like he liked that, but I mean, it's honest. I mean, why in the world would you turn around and do it, especially at this point? So, eh. Let's ask a little bit about him now that we've kind of gotten some in, and I think pretty much all the rest of these are personal questions about him. Have you done any soldiering yourself? The young Takarian nobleman shakes his head. I've had no combat experience, if that is what you mean, though. His expression turns somewhat annoyed. I did the course at the infantry officers' training school at Kanoji Zir-Rush. My father would hardly have abided any scion of House Holt without formal military training. I suppose my sister will be subject to the same ordeal soon enough. Your father puts a great deal of stock in military preparedness? Lord Cassius nods. A great deal of it. He is of the belief that no man or woman can be fit to hold power until they have a grasp of the basics of military command. Such an experience seems utterly foreign. You cannot think of a time where the bane-blooded houses of Tierra would have required their sons not only to acquire commissions within the army, but to demand that they earn them through some sort of school like common clerks. Then again, you must suppose that things in Takara are very different, more so in the house of Lord Cassius, his father. The young ambassador seems to scent your apprehension. I understand such a thing might seem outlandish to Tierrans, but then again, you have not had our experience in any such matters. Takara has been a great power since the beginning of civilization, and we must maintain readiness in the face of an impertinent would-be of any impertinent would-be usurpers. He smiles again, but this time it is a more sly, thoughtful expression. The Antari serve as a cautionary tale in that regard. Had the men in charge of Kharangia known how to defend the city, we would likely not be sitting here now. You feel your eyebrow rise for its own accord. I beg your pardon, sir. Lord Cassius either does not sense your protesting tone or intentionally rides roughshod right over it. From what information I have been able to gather, the Antari bungled the defense badly. Why did they not infall the breach with infantry at the top of the walls? Why did they not bury mines in the rubble or set up breastworks behind the breach? There are 100 things a competent defender could have done. Well, I mean, he does kind of have a point there. So, I mean, indeed, perhaps such measures would have defeated us. We would have taken the city regardless. It is a moot point, for the enemy did not do anything of the sort. Maybe I should split the difference. Well, yeah. Because I don't want to be overconfident with the answer, so I'll just say it is a moot point, for the enemy did not do anything of the sort. And I guess that's kind of diplomatic to a certain degree. And maybe he'll be able to sense that it was kind of insulting to say that, but we'll see. Your tone, you suppose, might have been a little sharp, especially for the task of conversing with an emissary of one of the greatest military powers in existence, but Lord Cassius takes no offense. He merely nods and laughs softly. I suppose you're right. The Antari did none of those things, which is why we're having this conversation now, yes? Indeed, before you can speak again, your thoughts are interrupted by the bright ringing of a spoon being tapped upon crystal. Your eyes are drawn to the source of the noise, and as soon as you fix upon it, you are filled with a pall of dread. His Grace, the Duke of Havenport, is standing, and in his hand rests a glass of rich Canarian red. The toasts have begun. Over the next half hour, you have little time to think about anything. All you can do is raise your glass as Havenport and his fellow senior officers offer toast after toast. First, the obligatory one to the health of his Tierran Majesty, then to the Takarian Aldecazern and Lord Cassius, and then a sequence of moral plaudits directed to increasingly more superfluous figures and abstract concepts, accompanied by increasingly longer and more wearying speeches. Perhaps one day, when you stand among the exalted ranks of the colonels and generals of the brigade, you too will find some joy in proposing endless toasts. However, while you still remain a mere captain, too junior to offer toast in such exalted company, it seems the point of such a fruitless exercise will remain elusive to you. It is all you can do to manage another bite or two from your plate after each toast before some colonel of the line of infantry or other inevitably stands up and makes another. To a fruitful campaigning season, perhaps, or to our friends and fellows in His Majesty's Navy. May the convoys they guard arrive swiftly and safely. All in all, a rather tedious process, and you cannot say that you are much saddened when the Duke rises again and offers what is formally the final toast of the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, to the valiant dead, may their names be remembered forevermore, he intones. The valiant dead, you echo solemnly through the weary chorus. As gratified as you may be by the end of the toast, the fallen of His Majesty's army, among them good men whom you have fought beside, deserve all the respect you can muster for them. That is something you will not forgo for any reason. Now, with the toast dispensed with, the tables are cleared, the few ladies in attendance make their way out, and the evening devolves into a most informal and terminal phase. Out comes the thick cigars, the small glasses of Wolframite digestive liquor, both thick and sweet, and the bottles of brandy. To your right, a heated debate erupts over some nonsensical scandal involving an actress and some baronet you've never heard of. To your left, Lord Cassius speaks in hushed tones with the Duke of Havenport. Only now do you finally have the time to form an opinion of the Sicaran envoy. Lord Cassius is a pompous fool, nothing less and certainly nothing more. I don't think that. Surely he's an arrogant fellow, but an intelligent and good-hearted one. A friendship with such a man would serve my ambitions well, or I would like nothing better to be his friend. He actually does seem kind of alright, so he's not as bad as the lady who was there before, and he seemed like he honestly wants to give some type of, insight into Takar and things, and also seems to give some advice too as far as military tactics go. So he might be useful to have around. Friendship with such a man would serve my ambitions well. Then again, I don't know what my ambitions are at this point. Sure, I just want to be his friend. Sure. As far as you can tell, there is little of the Takaran ambassador which you have reason to find fault with. He's earnest, intelligent, and open. You do not doubt that you have as much in common with each other as might be reasonably possible, considering your different backgrounds and stations. Yes, you think you rather like the fellow. He turns to you now, his expression still smiling and earnest. Well then, it seems a good thing indeed that we have been able to introduce ourselves to each other, he says. You smile back. Indeed, it has been a pleasure to make your acquaintance, you reply coolly, though not untruthfully. Lord Cassius's grin grows wider. Good. It must do for us to get along, especially as you are to be the one to command my escort. What? Your thoughts freeze in mid-stride. Your escort, you echo? The point-eared envoy nods. Yes, to take me to your king. We shall be seeing a great deal more of each other in the weeks to come. Well, is that not a fine surprise? Yes, indeed it is. Was not expecting that at all. Okay, so we're going to have to escort him to the king. Interesting. What is he up to? But we will find that out in the next video. So, if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will be having many other things in the future. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, and I will get back to them as quickly as I possibly can. And again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.